SciPost.org article shown to me by the that monarchist piece of cutlery. Headline: New research on female video game characters uncovers a surprising twist. Female gamers prefer playing as highly sexualized characters, despite disliking them. Article written by Eric W. Dolan Duck. In sexism video games categories. It's so good, though. This is something people intuited, of course, and have anecdotes regarding it. But I love that there's research. We're going to look at this. I skimmed it. We're going to look at this. And I don't see how the anetoid, sarkesioid acolytes could not mold over this if it shows what it's supposed to show. Can a strong female character who is also highly sexualized inspire positive perceptions from players? Not necessarily. We're going to see. My suspicion is, obviously, people's perception is going to be a self-report. The suspicion is, and I was talking to my girlfriend and she was suggesting the same thing, people think the proper thing to say is, ooh, icky. Right? The proper thing, no, we need, modest women. We need not Coomer women, whatever. You have to say that, right? According to a new study in communication research, researchers found that while strength in female video game characters might signal capability, it doesn't counterbalance the negative impact of sexualization. But in a surprising twist, female participants, despite generally disliking highly sexualized characters, were more likely to choose these characters when given the option to play as one. So do they generally dislike them? This is real, revealed preference hours. The study sheds light on why, even in today's gaming landscape, character design matters. The guy who wrote this article is off his nut, though. Even in today's gaming landscape, character design matters. What do you mean, even in today's gaming landscape? What the hell does that mean? Did something happen that character design wouldn't matter? And how different types of interactions from watching to playing shape player perceptions. A character's sex appeal and strength both play a role in how players perceive them, but these perceptions shift depending on whether players are simply watching or actively engaging with the character. I suppose that's one takeaway. We'll see how they did it. I feel like an assumption is being made here that it makes a difference to their perception, rather than makes a difference that they're aware they're being perceived, if you get what I'm saying, when they're giving an answer to their perspective on it. So just choosing something, they're doing it. Being asked to comment on it, they have to consider other people's perception of them more, and it's more to the forefront, and maybe that shapes what they say. Anyway, I'm pause-andying a text article. That's how you know things are bad. Background: why care about sexualization in video games? My background: why care about sexualization in video games? That's how you should be saying it. The portrayal of female characters in video games has long been a topic of debate. Critics argue that many games excessively emphasize sexual appeal in female characters, potentially reinforcing objectifying views that prioritize appearance over other qualities, such as stats. Some researchers, however, suggest that the frequent portrayal of female characters as strong and capable might counterbalance the negative impacts of sexual objectification. My gut tells me it doesn't work this way at all. -5 for sexualization, but +3 from portraying them as strong and capable. This is like, are game researchers game-brained to where they think it's like balancing stats behind the scenes? The study's authors aimed to understand if such strength cues might actually mitigate negative impressions of sexualized female characters. We presented a lineup of women with various muscle mummies and asked them to rate them on a scale of acceptability. They also wanted to explore how the nature of interaction, whether players actively control a character or just observe them on screen, affects these perceptions. I wonder if it's the dementoid thing, where people view their character as them. So it's like, this is good and okay because it's me! It's me! I think it's important to understand how gender socialization and prejudice like sexism inform video game development and player experiences, says study author Teresa Lynch, an assistant professor of communication technology at The Ohio State University and director of the Kronos Laboratory. That is an absurdly ominous... The Kronos Laboratory? They're eating their kids there? Sexism pervades gaming. For example, game content overwhelmingly features male characters to the exclusion of central female or gender minoritized characters. I like when games don't have any people at all. I like more abstract games a lot of the time. Give me those game, or not even abstract. Give me that food court. What is it? You know Last Call BBS, the last Zachtronics game? The one where you're programming the food devices, the machines, to spit out the food at the right time in the right way, make them, and you actually have the back end and you have to wire it together and plug in the settings and stuff and have it run. That shit is prime. Games that do feature female or gender minoritized characters often unfavorably stereotype and objectify these groups. In online gaming experiences, men and boys target women, girls, and gender minoritized individuals. We're talking about non-binaroids here, right? We're talking about non-binaroids, and I guess non-binary as an umbrella includes people who are like, I'm notoire, I'm this, I'm that. How do you target them? You give shit to a woman because you hear the voice, right? A non-binaroid? How do you peg them? Don't answer that in the way that you are thinking, you sick with sexist and harassing communication. I want to know more about why, when, and how these kinds of outcomes happen. At the same time, many women and girls and people who identify outside of the binary enjoy gaming a great deal. Many women, girls... What? This is the driest statement I've heard in my life. I count myself among them. All of them? Understanding why these people enjoy games in spite of, or even because of, the challenges sexism presents in gaming is fascinating to me. Is it a challenge if they enjoy it because of it? If these groups enjoy it because of that? In what sense are we describing something as a challenge? Sexism presents in gaming is fascinating to me. This study is one part of answering those big questions. I'd like to know what the challenges are. The researchers conducted 2 controlled experiments to investigate. These groups enjoy this in gaming, but it's a challenge, so we presumably should remove the things these groups enjoy in gaming. At least some of this group enjoys. The researchers conducted 2 controlled experiments to investigate how different design elements influence perceptions of female video game characters. Each experiment used unique character designs created in the fighting game Soul Calibur 6! The character creator! I only skimmed this, I didn't go into detail. So they're showing him like Hatsune Miku. I think you can instantly show like this is like the character creator is playing dress up. This is playing dress up. What, you want to make an ugly bitch? Well, I mean, I do. That's what I always do when I have a character creator. You saw my Street Fighter 6 character. But a chick playing this game, they're not going to make someone ugly or wanna. I think it being Soul Calibur 6 and it being custom characters as well probably warps this. Especially depending on how it's presented. And also, especially if the people being shown this are aware it's a custom character from Soul Calibur 6. Because they're going to be thinking about it in terms of making this character. Experiment 1. The impact of viewing female characters. Did they do that erection measuring thing where they put a rod in your cock? I was going to say no because it's women, but it's 2024, so... The first experiment included 239 undergraduate students from a communication program, with the majority of participants identifying as female. Ages varied from 18 to 51, though the group was generally younger. The researchers created 4 distinct types of female characters using Soul Calibur 6. This reminds me of the Australian study on men shit-talking women in video games, where they booted up some shit like Halo 2, some dead old game, and they used like recorded voice lines to play into the microphone at people. And they're like, people really rage when you do that. Yeah, no shit. I think it's less about it being a female voice and more about being a robot. But I'm gonna have to look into this and see if we can see those characters. Each character was customized to represent one of 4 combinations of sexualization and strength. Not absurdly subjective at all, by the way. High sexualization with high strength, high sexualization with low strength, low sexualization with high strength, and low sexualization with low strength. The high sex with high strength design was, of course, based on Voldo, and they played all of the animations. To achieve these variations, the team manipulated the characters' visual traits. Characters designed with high sexualization had features associated with previous research on sexualized portrayals: larger breasts, lower waist-to-hip ratios, and revealing clothing. Characters with low sexualization cues, on the other hand, displayed more modest proportions and less revealing attire. Strength cues were also manipulated, where high-strength characters were larger, more muscular, and carried bigger weapons. In contrast, is that a euphemism? In contrast, low-strength characters had smaller physiques and less imposing weaponry. Do you want a glamazon or a flat-chested dwarf? Participants watched 4 pre-recorded video clips. Please, for the love of God, tell me they're available. Each featuring a different character type engaging in a short combat sequence. After viewing each clip, did all the characters have the same moveset as well? After viewing each clip, participants rated the character across several dimensions, such as perceived sexualization, e.g. if the character's attire seemed revealing; strength, their perceived physical power; femininity. I think this is going to be heavily warped by participants having any knowledge of fighting games. And likability, especially if they use different movesets. Which presumably they must if they're going to go for weapon size. And likability, how much participants would enjoy playing as the character. Because they might just know this moveset with this weapon, it's slower, but it does more damage. At the end of the viewing session, participants also completed a selection survey, choosing which of the characters they would prefer to play. Sex appeal versus strength in viewing contexts. The results showed distinct patterns in how sexualization and strength cues shaped viewers' impressions of these characters. Characters with high sexualization cues were consistently rated as more sexualized compared to those with low sex appeal. Additionally, you did it! You made a sexy girl. Characters designed with high strength cues were rated as more formidable, aligning with the study's expectations. However, when a character combined high sexualization with high strength, participants perceived her as even more sexualized than characters with high sexualization alone. To be progressive, women in gaming have to be ugly and useless. To have non-sexualized women in games, they have to actually be useless and hideous. It explains a lot about modern writing. Incredible that these studios intuited that without any research, though. This outcome indicates that strength cues do not counteract the effects of sexualization, rather, they may amplify it. Hey, turns out people don't hate a strong woman. This pattern aligns with the fighting fucktoy theory, thanks Anita, which suggests that strength paired with sex appeal can reinforce objectifying impressions, heightening perceptions of the character as a sexualized object. The researchers also found that high sexualization was a key factor in perceptions of femininity and character likability. Characters with high sexualization were viewed as more traditionally feminine, yet they were also less liked, particularly by female participants. Bro! Strength cues, by contrast, did not independently influence likability, suggesting that the perception of likability may be more influenced by sexualization cues than by physical strength. So it's not just that women will say things about these characters but then want to play as them or like them more when tested. It's saying particularly by female participants. Women like it more than the men do. Gender differences and a surprising twist. Interesting gender. Women saying one thing but meaning another? Or holding a different feeling deep down inside? Impossible. Interesting gender... We asked one of the participants if this revelation... We asked one of the participants if this revelation bothered them, and she said, "No, it's fine." Interesting gender-based differences emerged in character preferences. Female participants generally disliked highly sexualized characters, but were more likely to choose characters with high femininity traits, typically associated with higher sexualization cues, when given a choice. Male participants, on the other hand, gravitated towards characters that were strong yet less sexualized, indicating different gender-based preferences in the interpretation of character traits. The Coomer stuff, it's not just that men and women like it the same, or both like it. Granted, this is one study. Women want it more! But also, are the men choosing between women too? I would presume so, because they haven't said otherwise. I think you also have to consider they're rating like how sexualized this is. They're not necessarily answering from their perception. They might be answering, what would society say is the more sexualized character? When actually they prefer the more physically fit woman or something, versus the like slim one or something. I don't know. Gender different. Maybe they had a bunch of Nazis who want the stout women who can pump out a lot of babies. I wasn't surprised by the fact that participants in our studies disliked the sexualized female characters. Not surprised they disliked it. If someone says they dislike it but then pick it, maybe it's not true that they dislike it. I think especially among younger generations who have grown up with social media and intuitively understand how media perpetuate impossible beauty standards, there's increasing scrutiny and critique around sexual objectification. I'm going to suggest not a single character you could show someone in Soul Calibur and the way they can behave and act is any sort of realistic standard being presented on any axis. I feel inferior because I will never move like Voldo. That said, I was surprised to see that in our first study, women still selected the most sexualized character when asked which character they would choose to play. Can we just apply revealed preference to everything? Just to everything. Women say they hate buttered popcorn, but always pick it over every food we offer them. Curious that they do that despite saying they don't like it. Or rather, curious that they do that despite not liking it. That said, I was surprised to see that in our first study, women still selected the most sexualized character. It's important to remember that this character was also rated as the most feminine, so it's possible that women were just selecting the character they most identified with. And hate themselves! Right. That feels like a gigantic can of worms for any sort of gender activism in gaming. They were primed to think of this in an anti-misogyny lens, and most of them still picked the sexy women. Yeah. Hang on, Siffy. It's a problem that there are all these women in gaming. All these women you see, they're so sexy. That's not fair to all those ugly bitches. We need to be good to the ugly bitches. Me, I'm gorgeous, so I want to play as the sexy one, but we need ugly bitches to represent the other ugly bitches that aren't me. Like my friends. However, this finding highlights why this research is so important, Lynch continued. If women are conflating sexual appeal with femininity, then can they disassociate those two concepts? This is a f***ing reach. This is your pre-existing framework at play. And if entertainment media like video games continue to portray female characters by emphasizing sex appeal, how does that shape expectations of women and women's value in society? But if they're saying it's bad, right? Experiment 2. There's also, I want to see the videos, because on top of all this, I talked about the dress-up element. Is there not also an element of taste in fashion? What if the less sexualized one just had clothes they didn't like as much, for instance? Like, what if the sexualized one was wearing something that they're like, that's my style, I think that clothing looks good. The ugly one also has clothing that doesn't look good on top of being more covering. Building on these findings, the impact of active control on impressions of female characters. Building on these findings, the researchers conducted a second experiment to assess whether controlling a character, rather than passively viewing, would affect participants' perceptions. The experiment involved 438 undergrad students following a similar design with the same 4 character types as in the first experiment. However, Instead of watching pre-recorded clips, the participants played as one of the 4 character types in a live, simulated combat session. This seems absolutely silly and ludicrous. In a fighting game, and they're giving them different weapons, so to signify strength, they gave them a bigger weapon. So what? With the one that signifies strength, they're playing as Nightmare, and then the other one they're playing like with Talim's moveset? It's a game. Like, how those characters play is going to have a huge influence on which one they prefer. Jesus Christ. Each participant was assigned to one of the character types and played for 10 minutes, aiming to defeat an opponent character. The researchers provided basic instructions on gameplay mechanics and controls before the session began. Following this interaction, participants completed... Did they perform better with one character over another because they might have had a simpler moveset or something? More spammable, faster moves that come out like lower frame moves or something? If they prefer that, come, like, please. Following this interaction, participants completed surveys similar to those in the first experiment, with the addition of new measures for warmth and competence. These measures were introduced to assess perceptions of personhood, or how much players might view the character as approachable and capable. Approachable? I'm sorry, on its face this seems utterly demented. The second experiment revealed additional insights, particularly around the impact of strength cues when participants actively control the character. Participants rated high-strength characters as less traditionally feminine, a perception that became more pronounced when participants directly controlled the character. This finding suggests that interacting with a formidable character can make players view them as less aligned with stereotypical femininity. Strength cues also influence participants' perception of warmth and competence. Okay. This is a load of fucking wank. This is a load of wank. Strength cues also influence participants' perception of warmth and competence. Characters with high strength were rated as more competent. Hey, the character where you press a button and they swing a big fucking sword and knock off like a quarter of the other person's health, people thought that character was based and competent and great. But the one where they just go dunk, dunk, dunk fast and it's little chips of health, they were like, man, this is a weak bitch. I don't know if it gets worse if you're familiar with fighting games, or worse if you're not familiar in those terms. However, these same characters were rated as less warm, indicating that formidable characters may be seen as less friendly or approachable. You also have to, because they picked Soul Calibur, you have to consider people's perception of different kinds of weapons. This finding implies that while physical strength can enhance a character's perceived capability, it may also create an impression of them as more distant or unapproachable. Gender differences were again observed in this experiment, specifically around the competence ratings. Female participants viewed high-strength characters as more competent compared to low-strength characters, while this difference was not significant among male participants. Yeah, because they're not fucking stupid and they understand it's a fighting game with different balance to the weapons, and get a sense of there being advantages and disadvantages, and differences between the different movesets, presumably. This difference suggests that female participants may have a stronger, positive response to strength than female characters, perceiving them as more effective or capable. Does it suggest that? How does it suggest that? The men could just be equally positive about high and low strength, and it be the same level of positivity as women are positive about the high strength. It could be that women shit on low strength characters, but I guess they have the scores they were given, and maybe it indicates something else, but the way it's phrased here, I don't know. Key takeaway: the importance of interactive media. The findings highlight that playing video games positions people with a different orientation to the content on screen, Lynch told SciPost. It can involve you in a way that simultaneously makes you feel like you're part of the content and game, that you are the character. That's something that games struggle to achieve, and only the very best games that try to do that achieve that on any level, I would suggest. So if you are a character, like, when a game makes you think like a character, I think Rain World does that very well. The way Slugcat moves and you have to deal with things, and the way Slugcat interacts with the world, you end up having to think like Slugcat. In a similar way to playing a puzzle game, and your thinking starts aligning to the rules of the game. I don't know about that in a fighting game, but maybe it's because I'm a nerd. And I approach fighting games in like the number crunchy way, where you think about the actual frames of the moves and shit. I'm thinking about advantage or not. Is it? I'm just thinking when I'm playing a fighting game, am I safe? Am I safe? Oh shit, what's the right punish? And because games, it can involve you in a way that simultaneously makes you feel like you're part of the content and game, that you are the character. So, if you are a character that has attributes that you appreciate and enjoy embodying, then you probably will experience some positive outcomes and interpret the experience similarly. In a fighting game, I normally pick the ones that have like a cool moveset. And because games require you to engage in action, you may find distinct things enjoyable in game. Like, I feel like this would make more sense if they were showing them something in an RPG or something, maybe. I don't know. Using Soul Calibur for this seems so weird, so strange. And because games require you to engage in action, you may find distinct things enjoyable in games compared to less interactive experiences, like watching movies. And I mean, like a game where you're fighting with blades and sticks sometimes. Is that something people can identify with? Instead of just seeing a hero defeat a horrible villain on screen, you feel part of the experience of vanquishing that villain. That can be really awesome. You're talking about Soul Calibur? I mean, you didn't have them playing arcade mode. They didn't go defeat Nightmare at the end of Soul Calibur 2 or whatever happens in arcade mode. You had them fight in like the practice room or something, practice mode, or like a 1v1. They were just fighting some random guy. Why are you saying this? But if the character has attributes that aren't so great, maybe they are sexually objectified, or portrayed as cute but helpless, then that's... No character in Soul Calibur is portrayed as helpless. They're all ruthless killers, bro. With different kinds of motivations, but still, they're all pretty brutal. Then that stands to diminish you in the same way that the heroic portrayal elevated you. Where am I? Lynch said, our findings suggest that people are paying more attention to the powerfulness of female characters who they can play as, whereas this factor wasn't so important when they were just watching the game video. Yeah, because you're in a... Probably because you're in a scenario where you want to win and beat someone. You want to win and beat someone. How powerful your character is matters a lot more. Or how powerful you think they are matters a lot more. Being able to translate those characteristics of the visual portrayal into actions of the player was actually taking shape to the experience. This is like aliens discovering video games. Very strange. Limitations and future directions. The researchers controlled the participants' self-reported average weekly time spent playing video games, as prior gaming experience might influence character impressions. So too could their ignorance, though. So too could their ignorance. Different characters have different skill floor, like the different minimum amount of competence to get good results with. They were using different weapons, so they had different movesets. Someone who's inexperienced might not recognize the strength of a character that is faster but does less damage. And that will warp their perception of character's strength in combat, as opposed to someone who knows how to use all the characters. Right? The study did, however, have some limitations. The researchers used a single video game genre, fighting games, which typically emphasize physicality and competition. This narrow focus limits the extent to which findings can be applied to other types of games, such as adventure or role-playing games, where character interaction and storylines might influence impressions differently. One big point is that we know that other content elements such as backstory and narrative can influence the way that people understand a character's portrayal. Thank you, academic. Very smart. Genius. Genius commentary. I'm glad your life is dedicated to this. This study didn't get at that, so it's possible that if these characters were more fleshed out, that would affect the results of the work. Going forward, the researchers aim to investigate how prolonged interactions with these types of characters influences players' long-term attitudes and beliefs. In the long term, my lab group and I are trying to understand longer-term effects of interaction with female characters in games, Lynch said. We're interested in understanding beyond initial impressions and looking at how distinct interactions with characters through story or varying modes of play might disrupt or strengthen effects. We're also very interested in understanding the positive impact of female characters on players, not just the drawbacks or negative side. People play video games because they like them. Amazing! Actually, I hate video games. This is false. I disprove their incredibly broad statement and find the experiences entertaining, but also because they have meaningful experiences. We're exploring that side of things because it's all part of the same question. You're not going to talk about competitiveness, self-improvement, discipline when we're talking about, in this instance, a fighting game? No, it's not going to come up as a reason people play. Play them for things external to the game as well, especially in competitive ones, related to community. Friendships. Being in a group that plays that game. Things like that are a big deal.